What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. New York and Boston. Boston has perfected modern basketball. It was a very simple concept that they were unleashing tonight in order to generate all these quality threes. They generated 20 threes that were catch and shoot threes that synergy logged as uncontested. And they got over 1.6 points per attempt on those shots. It all stems from a very basic concept. They want to create a weak side 2-on-1, meaning like where you have a shooter on the wing, shooter on the corner, with one defender that's kind of splitting the difference between those two. And they do that with a bunch of different ways. They usually find a matchup that they can hunt or an action that they can run that either brings two to the ball or brings the low man over. From there, it's very basic and they just play their drive and kick. In this particular game, it was two actions that they were consistently running. And this is something that we talked about. When we talked about the Knicks and what they could potentially look like this year, the two things that concerned me were Brunson and Cat in the starting lineup. Yeah, you have some really dynamic defensive talent between those guys, but those two guys, Brunson's going to hedge and recover. That means put two on the ball for a second. And Karl-Anthony Towns is going to run some variation of a drop coverage. And so consistently in this game, they'd bring Brunson's man over to set a screen. And they'd have, I think it was Derek White or Jrue Holiday, whoever was on him would slip out of it. Because again, the idea with the hedge is like, okay, Tatum's got the ball. We have Derek White come set the screen. If Jalen Brunson just runs up with him, Tatum's going right downhill to the rim. Probably dunking on somebody, especially with your 5-out spacing and there's nobody underneath the rim, right? So Brunson has to cut off the driving lane. If he hedges out to cut off the driving lane, then Derek White can slip out of it. Tatum throws that little pass over the top. Now we're in our weak side 2-on-1, right? Karl-Anthony Towns, this is a big part in the early part of the game. Tatum's first three, really, really deep drop coverage from Karl-Anthony Towns. Tatum comes right off and hits the shot. There were like 4 baskets that Boston got in the opening minutes on plays where Cat was sagging really far back. And then in the later portions of the game, Cat started to come out to the level, but once again, they were doing it as a drop coverage, so he'd show at the level, but the guard would still be chasing over the top, 2 on the ball. Now that there's 2 on the ball, we have our weak side 2-on-1, right? And from that weak side 2-on-1, Boston is just the best team in the league at getting the ball to the guy that can be the decision maker who can then make that kick out pass to the shooter on the weak side. There's 3 major elements to it. There's the driver as the decision maker, off-ball spacing, like making sure you're always in a spot that help defenders make a decision. Way too often in the NBA, you will see teams, when they get sloppy, as the driving kick gets going, guys will stand too close to each other or they'll end up in the same spot, and like all of a sudden you make yourself easy to guard. Those spacing principles are critical. It's not just 5 out either. Boston will have guards and bigs cut along the baseline. It's kind of like this constantly churning machine where guys always know, like, okay, this guy's driving and he's going to be coming out to the corner. That means I need to relocate up here to the wing, and this guy might need to cut through. Like there's all these different like little spacing dynamics that they're great at, right? So the driver is the decision maker, off-ball spacing, and then elite shot making ability. 18 of the Celtics catch and shoot threes in this game were guarded, and they still got 1.17 points per attempt on those shots. Because elite shooters, it doesn't matter if the hand comes in late. As soon as they catch and they get their rhythm, they don't even see that hand. The only way you're really bothering them is if you can bother the shooting pocket or bother their base. And what's interesting to me is all those concepts feed into each other and it just kind of goes off the rails, right? Like elite shooting creates hard closeouts. Hard closeouts make for easier drives. Drives to the rim create those weak side 2-on-1s, and proper spacing and good decision-making gets the ball to the open man. That's where the elite shooting comes back in as these guys are knocking these shots down. Like, it's so interesting because, like, there's a conversation to have. There were 15 teams in preseason, 15 teams that attempted over 43s per game. There's a conversation to have about three-point shooting in the NBA And if it's a good television product, to just dribble up the ball and take threes. But it's not about Boston. Boston plays beautiful team basketball that generates lots of quality three-point shots, and it honestly is fun to watch. It's the teams that just take threes for the sake of taking threes. That's when it turns into ugly basketball. We're going to see a lot of teams this year try to mimic Boston. In the coming years, it'll probably get worse and worse. And if you don't do it the right way, you won't get the results and it will look ugly. And so I think it's interesting to me because everyone talks about Boston and them being this like high volume 3-point shooting team, but it goes so much deeper than that to the process. They have such a beautiful process for generating elite catch and shoot opportunities for elite shooters. And that is what makes this team so difficult to guard. Tatum was absolutely amazing. One of my big predictions for this year, if you guys remember, is like his shooting slump was real. It was a real shooting slump that lasted the entire postseason and the Team USA experience. But I consistently said it's just a slump. There was a lot of talk like, oh, did Tatum get too buff? No, he didn't get too buff. Buff dudes have been making jump shots forever. That's ridiculous. Like, it's not about putting on muscle. It's about, like, sometimes you can enter, like, that jump shooting is hard. You can shoot thousands and thousands and thousands of reps over months and months and months, and then go 3 for 17 in your first 3 games. Like, it is a mind fuck. And so it is possible to enter into slumps where you start to overthink your shot and it just kind of expands on itself and it becomes worse and worse and worse. And like, Tatum has just been too good of a jump shooter for too long for it to be any more than just an actual slump. Well, how about 8 for 11 from 3 tonight? How about 10 for 13 on jump shots overall? He had one game all year last year where he made 8 threes. He hit 8 jump shots just off the dribble. He was 8 for 10 on off the dribble jump shots. And that's about as resounding of a you bet your ass I can shoot the basketball type of statement from Tatum that you could see. Again, super small sample size, but that's some of the best jump shooting we've ever seen from Jayson Tatum. One of the most common mailbag questions I got this summer was like, okay, so Jayson Tatum's not considered one of the top tier superstars in the league. What does he need to do? What can he do to enter into that tier? This is certainly one way to do it. If he can become a guy who is truly deadly with the jump shot, both off the catch and off the dribble and off of movement off the catch, then he enters into that tier. So let's keep an eye on it over the course of the beginning of the season and see just how much of a leap he can take there. This is a guy that has never been able to go in recent years. He's like 3 or 4 years in a row where he's been below a point per possession on pull-up jump shots. If he gets that up to like 1.05, 1.1 points per attempt on volume, and he's hitting threes off the move and that sort of thing, like that would be a massive ceiling raiser for him because he's just so damn tall. And especially in this system, I mean, you saw there was a play in the first half where he had like a drive against Josh Hart, just easy breezy little left-handed drive for a layup. This team creates so much space. You're going to see teams go like, okay, we need to stay home off the ball. And that's where those opportunities for him to drive to the basket will be there. But the better he is as a pull-up shooter, the more those guys have to be on their toes to contest, which creates easier opportunities to blow by them off the dribble. Just a resounding statement from Jayson Tatum. Super, super excited to see how much of this is real over the course of this season. Every starter was awesome for Boston. They were combined 26 for 41 from 3. We talked about margins for the Lakers. The Celtics dominated the margins in this game. Did a really good job of chasing the Knicks off the 3-point line. Like, we talk so much about 3-point volume. That's 2 sides of the floor. If you take 1,000,000 threes, that's great. But if you give up 1,000,000 threes, you're going to lose. And they just did a really nice job of chasing the Knicks off the line. They held them to only 30 3-point attempts. Like, the Knicks actually shot 55% from the field in this game. But because they chased him off the 3-point line, they kept him off the offensive glass, only 5 offensive rebounds. Boston took care of the basketball, so they which prevented any sort of live ball turnover situations. They had just 4 turnovers. They allowed only 4 fast break points for the Knicks. They dominated the margins. It was like a complete and total outclassing of the Knicks that we saw from Boston tonight. Above and beyond anything having to do with shot making, the Celtics just looked like a sharper basketball team tonight, and that's the scary part. On the Knicks front, again, similar to what I talked about with the Wolves, I don't care about the offensive end. It's basically a brand new basketball team. There's no DiVincenzo, there's no Randall, there's no Mitchell Robinson. Think about how much Isaiah Hartenstein was a cog for them in their 5-out attack last year. Isaiah Hartenstein, like you're going to see him with the Thunder this year when his hand heals. That dude he just greases the wheels for those 5-out offenses. And not having him there is a change. Adding Mikal Bridges, adding Karl-Anthony Towns. You can tell, especially Karl-Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, and Mikal Bridges, all of them don't really know when to be aggressive or when to keep the ball moving. Like you can tell they're still feeling out like their order of operations on offense. That's guaranteed to lead to super inconsistent and sloppy play over the first few months. Same goes for Minnesota. So I don't really want to have any sort of sweeping declarations about either of these teams until we get at a minimum 20 games into this. It's going to take some time for them to figure it out. Mikal Bridges made some bizarre tweak to his shooting form, and he hasn't shot the ball well at all since the start of training camp. He was 2 for 16 on catch and shoot jump shots in preseason, 2 for 7 from 3 tonight. Again, I think they'll be fine, but just give them time. I was really disappointed in their defensive effort, though. They did a terrible job of containing the ball, which is like a death sentence against Boston. I talked about earlier, Karl-Anthony Towns was way too passive in his help and drop situations to start the game, just sitting back in the paint. That won't work against Boston either. I thought their rotations were slow. They got killed on the glass. And it was disappointing because you built this team to contend with Boston. So even with you adding all this talent, you're still at a talent disadvantage. What did I say in the season preview? If you guys remember, I said, to me, the Knicks are basically a lesser version of the Celtics. Yes, Jalen Brunson is better than any of their guards, but Brunson, Josh Hart, or Brunson, Deuce McBride is not that much better than Derek White and Drew Holiday. And when you factor in their defensive contributions, you could argue it's close to even. OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are really damn good basketball players. They're not as good as Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum. I personally think, even though Cat, if I was starting a franchise with Cat, he's a better basketball player than Kristaps Porzingis. But within these roles on these teams, because Porzingis is a better rim protector, because Porzingis is nearly as good as an above the break shooter, because Porzingis can post mismatches and score so well, Porzingis is every bit as good as Cat, if not even better, in his specific role on these teams. So I was having a hard time conceptualizing any way for the Knicks to beat Boston anyway. But you're already at a disadvantage. You can't afford to also be the sloppier team. And that's the disappointing part. Is it's not like you went in there and Boston shot your face off and you lost by 15, but you played a great game. You played an awful basketball game. But it is very early. I just like to see when teams are locked in to start the year, because to me, that's an indicator of how serious you are. But it's definitely a disappointing start to the season for the Knicks. I will be covering both of these games in more detail tomorrow in an episode of Timpf's Tape. That probably won't be on the podcast feed. That will probably just be on YouTube. But I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. I'm going to rewatch both games, and I'm going to put together a bunch of film, and we're going to get into more detail on these concepts. So make sure you guys check out the YouTube feed.